Good morning, coaches. Today I'm going to be talking about transfer. So when I say transfer, basically that means we're thinking about how what we do in practice can manifest itself in the games. We want to use practice as a basis for how we can improve, how we can grow, both as individuals and as a team. And of course, we want those behaviors that we're encouraging in practice to show up in the game. So how can we do that? There are two basic things that I like to think about for transfer to encourage that what we do in practice goes to the game. The first is realism. So when we think the game, there are certain inherent necessities that a game has. You have direction, you're attacking a goal. You're also defending a goal. You have to maintain that direction for both attack and defense. Similarly, you have opponents. You always have to invade an opponent's space while at the same time protecting your space from an opponent. Direction and opponents, and of course, you actually have your dimensions, your space within which you're playing. And so maintaining those elements of realism are vital. So for example, game slices. Let's say, I'm a coach of a 7v7 team, and my team has been struggling to build out of the back. And so we have our 7v7, so I'm going to create a scenario based off of a situation that we see in the game, and I'm going to make a slice of that for practice. So let's say my goalkeeper, my outside defender, and my center defender are the players along with a central midfielder, are the ones who seem to be kind of struggling, seem to be not being on the same page with building out of the back. Our opposition gets ready to press. And these two players specifically are the ones who always seem to cause us the most problems. So really what we seem to have here is a 3v2. So what I might do for this is take that particular slice of the game. I might get a central defender, an outside defender, and a midfielder, and along with an opposing attacker and an opposing midfielder or winger, and we're going to work through different scenarios of that particular slice of the game. So I might, as a coach, put myself right here with the ball, and I'm going to play different kinds of balls in to each of these players that they're going to have to deal with and problem solve. Their goal, of course, is to get out of the box, progress the ball to the field. So for them to score, they want to possess and progress the ball outside of the box. If they can get past that quote-unquote end line, they get a point. For the opposition team, they're in the numerical inferiority. If they win possession, all they have to do is get out. Now, ideally, of course, if you want to make it that true slice, for them, getting out would be dribbling out across this end line or this sideline. And if you want to make it like that, that's fine. But creating that slice of the game so the players can see very realistically, when we're in a game and we have this scenario, this specific slice, we're struggling to get out. And we're going to find some different ways in which we can problem solve. And so as a coach, for that practice component, I'm playing different kinds of balls in every single time. And if you want to, have like two kind of groups intermixing, working through, each time the ball is played too, it's not always a perfect pass, just like the goalkeeper would make here. It's going to be a check pass to this player. It might be a check pass to this player, but we're going to challenge them to deal with that realistic game slices. Second, mixed groups. Most of us have our practice sessions Tuesdays and Thursdays. There's lots of teams that are in that involvement. Let's say the game that we're going to be playing is a Heartland game against a really strong, really fast opponent, and we don't really have the specific kind of player profile in our group that we're going to be facing on Saturday. What I might do is look across and say, hey, if I'm a 2014 coach, I might look and say, hey, I see the 2013s, you are practicing at the same time. Can we work together? And can we maybe do a little bit of a 20-minute scrimmage where we can maintain that same kind of, we're working on building out of the back, but we're going to play against a slightly stronger component. So if I'm using a play, practice, play methodology, I'm going to keep my group for play, work through a game slice practice, and then we're going to mix with that 2013 group who might be working on something different, which is even better, so that we can work out of the back while they can work on what they need to. But mixing those groups is a great way to change and add some variability to give yourself a little bit more realism for what you might face, because you're never going to face your own teammates. Last, for my group of 2007 girls, there's not a 2005, 2006, and the 2009s play after us. So it's hard to find a realistic slice or a realistic group that we can mix with. Sometimes we'll play with some of the younger boys, but what I primarily do is I use dual intentions. Basically what that means is when we do our 5v5, 6v6 play, I will go to each group and they will have a separate game focus, a separate intention, and neither team knows what the opposite team's intention is. For example, yesterday, and this is at Bentonville High School, we were doing a 6v6 scrimmage, and I could tell that one team was struggling playing out of the back, and so I literally went to them and I paused and I said, hey, 3 defenders, including the goalkeeper, because that team was the one that was playing with the goalkeeper. I said, when you receive the ball, you have to play short. So goalkeeper you have to play short. Before you can release the ball, you have to commit a defender. Now it's very restrictive. They couldn't just pass to anything that they saw. They had to commit a defender first. And once they committed a defender, at that point they could pass into the space that was created by the defender who had stepped, or they could dribble. But regardless, they wanted to. The intention for them was to try to create space behind that first line, because what they were doing was basically they would get it and they would pass to one of those midfielders or attackers immediately, but that midfielder attacker would be surrounded by 2 or 3 players. There was no space from which to operate. So the idea for them was to try to get them to practice creating space by committing a defender. The other team didn't know that. The other team had no idea what that restriction was, and it made it for a more realistic situation, because if your whole team knows everybody is doing this specific kind of thing, it's going to be harder. It's going to manipulate the way in which the opposing team is going to play. So they know you're always going to be playing short. How is that going to change what they do? Second, interleaving. This is a slightly different kind of view. Typically when we think a practice, and if we're using a play, practice, play model, we think we have our basic theme for the day, which will stay with the building out of the back. We're going to build out of the back, and we're going to do a play game that's going to practice building out of the back. We're going to do a practice that does the same thing, and a play at the end that does the same thing. So we're using that same theme with the idea behind it is we want to give different looks to that problem. With interleaving, you actually go from one intention to a separate intention to a separate intention, and you interleave each of those principles and each of those focus points, with the idea being, instead of massing all of your practice, by interleaving, your players will be able to build connections between different intentions and different principles in a much more effective way than they would if it was massed. Now, the research does show that interleaving is a very useful way of doing that, and it does increase the ability of players and students, something I use in the classroom, to make connections and have that near transfer and that far transfer as well. So what that might look like in a real basic template is if I have Tuesday, Thursday practices and a play, practice, play template. Our first play, maybe it's 3v3s, but the goal is, hey, can we create combinations? Can we create some different ways of combining as we move the ball up the field? We move to a practice, and we're going to do a practice where we're going to work on being compact. We're going to make a bigger space, and we're going to overload the defense, and we're going to do something where they have to work on being compact as a defensive unit. Can you be compact? And our final play, we're going to open it back up, and we're going to build combinations, and it's going to be 6v6, and each combination might be incentivized. If you can do an overlap, if you can do a give and go, each one of those is going to be incentivized. On Thursday, it's going to be the exact opposite. We're going to work on a play which is going to be compact, and maybe it's 3v2s, maybe it's something similar, but we're working on that compact principle, moving into a practice component. Maybe it's where we do then go back to that creating combinations, but we're doing it with a game slice, building out of the back. Again, same thing, we're creating combinations just in a different part of the field, but focusing on attack versus defense. And finally, moving into that play at the very end, and it's 6v6, and if you get maybe our incentive there in that 6v6 is if the defensive 3 gets split, they lose a point, or the opponent gets a point. But by using an interleaving approach, each of those separate intentions woven in together will give players different ways to think, hey, we just worked on creating combinations at the beginning. Now we're focusing on a defense that is trying to be compact. That's going to challenge me to think about and utilize those same kinds of things we worked on in the play session in the practice session. And so by interleaving them, players make better connections between different intentions and different principles in different parts of the game that are it's going to more likely transfer. So when we think transfer, we want to move from what we do in the practice, can we maintain its viability and so that it transfers to the game? Maintaining realism. Can we find game slices to focus on so the players see the resemblance between what we do in practice and the game? Can we maybe find some mixed groups that we can work with in our practice times to create that more game-like scenario, even if it's a 15-minute scrimmage, either at the beginning or at the end, there's value to both. Can we think about dual intentions within our group? Can we let one team know one thing and a separate team know something different so that they each get to work on something meaningful, but at the same time keep it realistic so that not everybody knows what the rule is? And finally, maybe we can add some interleaving so that we can increase the way in which players can find connections between different facets and phases of the game. Transfer.